Hello, slight chance of rain, probably be fine. You can worry too much about these things. So, I've got a little bit of progress on a few things, and that's what we're going to talk about this week. This is finished, it's not been pressed, I've just realised I really should have pressed it. But the thing about that is it's too late. I can't possibly stop recording and go and press things, because my ironing board is covered in yarn at the minute, which everything is, to be fair. So this is the one that had the supplemental weft. This coloured chunky yarn isn't part of the structure, it's just there to be decorative, and I'll hold it up so that you can actually see it, that might help. And the plan was that these little ends would turn into little pom-poms, and they didn't, I suspect because they're slightly too long. And I didn't want to trim them any shorter because until this was wet finished, these bits of yarn were loose essentially and they could have fallen out. So I didn't want to trim them any shorter. And then when I pulled it out of the wet finish, I thought, well, now I can go along and trim these short. But the thing is, it feels so nice, I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to leave it, and it's just going to be what it is, and that's fine. So this is what it looks like. So yeah, this is the one that had all the floats on it. So these bits here were just long floats where it wasn't woven in through the weaving. And then I snipped them all, and then I wet finished it. And I'm slightly falling over backwards because I'm on shaky ground. It's fine. And then the other side is also really nice. I really like this other side. I love that little sort of subtle dot pattern, which is what I'm going to call it, because I don't know if there is a name for that, but I'm calling it a subtle dot pattern. So I'll show you the length because the colour... Oh, will I? Big words. Don't know if I can follow through. There we go. It does need pressing. Look at that. Look at the state of that. But the colour... The chunky yarn does shift through a sort of colour change. That is great question. So glad I asked on your behalf. Fantasy Jumbo by Hobie. It's discontinued, but there are a couple of colours left, or there were a couple of weeks ago when I looked. Not that Hobie Yarns wants to sell me yarn anymore, but I'm over it. It barely hurts at all. So I'm pleased with that, and I was thinking I would snip those down, but it just feels really nice to do that with. So I'm just going to leave it, and it's just going to be what it is. So the little loom still has the thing on it from last week. I'll show you where I'm at with that. Just give me 1 second to grab the little loom, maybe 2 seconds, because as I said, uneven ground. So still quite a lot to do on this. Let me just get myself back in frame. There we go. Nope. There we go. So I've just finished the first shuttle. That's why there's no shuttle attached, because I've finished it there and I'm going to start again with a fresh shuttle. That's how all this works. And I've got quite a lot to do. You can see there's still a lot of wraps at the back. It just was slow progress because most of my energy went into the big loom. And that took a lot of energy, and I'm going to tell you about that right now. It is very nice to be back on the big loom temporarily because I am firmly going to do some sewing before I warp this up again. But I will say that this loom is a little rickety because someone, that would be me, didn't assemble it properly because she was too excited to start weaving and didn't spend the time making sure it was done properly. It's fine, I just have to hit bits of it with a mallet before I warp up. It's all fine. So this yarn here is the yarn I showed you last week, Pardalote by Changeling Coloured Yarns. And it starts with the black, moves through to the yellows and then oranges and reds, and then goes back into the oranges, yellows and black. And I've got 2 repeats of this colour patch in this weaving, which is not quite, well, I don't know that it's a shawl. It's too wide to be a scarf. I don't know. It's just going to be a piece of weaving that I wear because I'm keeping this one. So ideally, in a perfect world, this would be way more lined up than it is. But I'm not upset about how uneven it is. I think it's a more visually interesting effect. And I did have 2 goes at warping it up. My problem, the first time I warped it up, is, okay, let me explain, quite badly probably, how I warp my looms. I do what's called direct warping, which is you tie your yarn to the back beam. I'm pointing at it, it's on the other side of the heddle there. So you tie your yarn to the back beam, bring it through the heddle, which is here, bring it down and then loop it over a warping peg, which is like a stick attached with a clamp to a table or something. That's my impression of a warping peg. It's very good. And so with a wide piece like this, what you really need is multiple warping pegs. Because if you've got your peg in the middle here, the yarn that comes down from the centre has less distance to travel than the yarn at the sides, because the yarn at the sides has to come in on an angle to get to that peg. So I was warping up with just the single peg. I don't have a place to do multiple pegs at the moment. One day, it's all I aspire to. And then I found when it got a little bit further along, it was getting very tight because I was trying to pull it to match the colour pattern. and you don't actually have any tension when you're warping up that way. You're just measuring length, so it doesn't have to be tight on the peg. But it was getting very tight, and then it was shifting out too far for me to be happy with. So I unwarped that. I say that like it was very easy. It wasn't. I had to say very many swears, and I did end up in quite a big tangle. The second time round, much more successful, although you can see that it's still a bit out of kilter here. This is too far down. And I did that by doing it in little sections and then moving the peg. So the yarn was essentially travelling the same distance no matter where it was on the warp. So I'd measure out this part, tie it off so that it didn't all fall apart, move the peg, and then warp up the next bit. Ideally, as I said, multi-peg situation, don't have one of those. So it's quite an open weave. You can see my hand back there maybe. I can't see the viewfinder very... Yes, you can. Look at that. Oh, and for my next trick. It's a little bit too open just there, but that's fine. That'll shake out in the wet finish. The reason it's a little bit more open than it might otherwise need to be is because this yarn in the warp is a lot thinner at the moment because it's under tension. The yarn I've got for the weft, let me just reach across you there, is Luxury, Bendigo Woolen Mills Luxury 4-ply. So it's the same weight as this yarn for the warp. It's just that the warp yarn has a fair bit of stretch in it and it is under tension, so it's a bit thinner looking. Once that tension comes off, that will close in a lot more, and then when I wet finish it, hopefully it will bloom and be spectacular. It's going to be spectacular anyway. I'm already really happy with it, and I literally have just started it. And it's a good thing that I'm really happy with it, because I invested quite a lot of time into warping it up. So I'm glad that I'm happy with it. Otherwise, I'd be so annoyed. I really love this sort of effect, this sort of single warp colour effect, and I do that sometimes with the yarns that I use by sort of spacing them out differently, but I love that effect. Anyway, it's coming along really well. It's weaving up nicely. I've literally just started. The hem stitching is not... Yeah, I've advanced, I think, once. I can just feel the hem stitching in under there. Will this be off the loom for next week? Look, I'm not promising anything. I can't promise anything. I've still got a lot to do on that little loom as well. So we'll see how I get on. It might be off for next week, but then again, it might not. And of course the cross stitch, which I am still chipping away at. So last week it looked like this, and I have been looking at it while I'm working on it thinking, oh, this is nearly done. And then I take it off the frame and realise, no, it isn't. So this is how it's looking now. And I mean, it is quite close to done. If I really was able to sit down and have a good go on it. But as I keep saying, work expects me to do work, which is a bit much. So last night I started finishing off this leaf down here. I filled in these leaves. I was going to say, quite pleased with myself, that both of the birds are complete, but they're not, because I forgot to do the white up here. So there's that beak highlight and the white face and a little bit on the end of the beak there. But other than that, the birds are finished and it's just the background now. So I'm really enjoying it. I will again put the link to the chart in the description. They've discontinued the kit, so you'll have to source your own threads. You'll be fine. But if you'd like to have a go on this one, and I do recommend it, it's a lot of fun, I'll put a link to the chart. And that is all I have for you this week. Thank you so much for watching. You take care of yourself, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.